Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about possibly the most confusing freshman course load at any university, also known as Texas A&M's ETAM process. Now, for those of you who are possibly looking to enroll in A&M engineering for this upcoming semester, I wanted to give a full breakdown of what the ETAM process is, what your course schedule will usually look like during your freshman year, and how AP credits can transfer over, and what are some different classes that you can take and the options that you have whenever you are a freshman at A&M. I was fortunate enough to have people who I already knew at A&M to walk me through this entire process, but I know that the campus at A&M is incredibly diverse and there are people who may not have those same opportunities. So I thought I'd just make it fair, give you guys a sense of what freshman courses will look like, and hopefully give you guys the best chance of actually ETAMing. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So for courses, you'll usually have some sort of symbol that denotes the subject, and then you'll have a number that kind of denotes the level. It basically goes by a leveling system. So you have 100 level classes, 200 level classes, 300 level classes, and then finally 400 level classes. Now, just because this number is less than this doesn't necessarily mean that cloud computing is harder than design and analysis of algorithms. It just means they're basically on the same sort of tier. So if you've ever done like a tier list before, like, oh yeah, this is S tier, this is A tier, whatever. So yeah, that's how it kind of works. So now that you guys at least have an introductory explanation to how these courses are actually structured, we can go to something that probably applies to a lot of you, which is AP and IB credits. So to be able to check what AP tests you've taken and the score you received and the credits that will actually transfer to A&M, you can go to this website called testing.tamu.edu/credits. Say, for example, this is a really popular one that people usually take credit for, Calculus BC. So let's say I got a 3, right? So that'll give me credit for Math 151. And if I got a 4, then that'll give me credit for Math 151 and Math 152. And as you guys probably noticed, it also shows the number of credit hours that you can receive for this course. So you can see how many hours are actually being transferred from your AP credits, which is really useful whenever you're building your degree plan later. But let's not worry about that. Let's just focus on freshman courses. So now that you guys can see what AP credits you have, I want to show you how this actually looks inside of the portal. So this is the Howdy portal where you'll effectively manage all of your classes, registrations, and everything like that, financial aid, whatever. So for example, we have our credits listed here, and then we'll see the actual courses that they transfer over for. So for example, these are the credits I've already taken credit for, and we have the cross-listed A&M classes listed as well. Now, the reason I didn't accept all of my credits at one time is because there's a chance if you accept too many credits, you might be placed at out-of-state tuition or go above full-time. And you don't want to risk that, so make sure to get with an advisor first before you actually claim these credits, as it says right here. But I just want to show you how it kind of works. So, for example, I still have my US history that I can still claim. And I'll have the 3 different options to accept credit for. And obviously I'm going to choose the one that gives me the most credit and then go ahead and accept. A really cool thing that AP credits can help you overcome is the university core curriculum. So as this kind of sounds, this is essentially what all university students must take at Texas A&M as the core curriculum. Now, how does this actually work? So you don't have to finish all of these classes in your freshman year, but there may be some electives that you could take in your freshman year if you wanted to. One of the most popular ones is polls, but I'll get to that in a second. So for example, we have this example where I have history for 6 credits. And if we see here, we have American history as well for 6 credits. So this is a core curriculum that I have to get by the time if I want to graduate. So let's look at the classes that I have to take that add up to 6 hours that would fulfill this requirement. And once again, if you guys want to see this website, it's just search up like Texas A&M University Core Curriculum and it should pop up. So if we go back to American history, we can see History 105 and History 106 here. And if we go here, you'll see that my AP credit that I took for taking the AP US History exam is 3 and 3, which adds up to 6. And if I was to accept this, then I would effectively meet these requirements. Now, the reason I haven't accepted this yet is because I already know that I met the requirements. So by the time that I graduate, I just have to accept them and I'm good. So I haven't accepted them yet just because I haven't really consulted with my advisor yet. But as long as you have those in the book, then you should be good. So whenever you're making your degree plan, this is an easy way for you to check what AP exams you've taken and how they will transfer over to the credits for university core curriculum. So you can go to this website, check what exams you've taken, and then compare it with this to see if the course that's listed on the right side of the AP exam has already been taken by you. So for example, I was looking at history 105 and 106, but let's say, for example, I wanted to meet this government one. So let's go back to here and let's check out government politics. And you'll see it covers only polls 206, which means I would then have to take polls 207, or I would have to take government 2306 at a community college, for example, which is what a lot of people end up doing. In addition to university core curriculum, if you scroll down a bit, you can also see cultural discourse requirements and also international and cultural diversity requirements that you also have to fulfill. Now, one class that is really helpful for this is called ENS 101. So there are classes that can count for multiple university core curriculums and, for example, cultural discourse or international and cultural diversity at the same exact time. So one of these classes is called ENS, and there are plenty of other classes, but this one is a popular one, for example. So you see here that it counts for this requirement. And if we go to university core curriculum and we search up ENS, you also see that it appears in creative arts. Now, don't worry too much if you don't have the exact credits that you have in your exact university core curriculum. During your NSC, your advisor will likely or definitely go through this with you. You actually get a checkbox to see, okay, what AP exams you have, and then what core curriculum and what cultural diversity or KICD does it apply to. So yeah, but now that we have this basic concept out of the way, I want to go through a sample course structure during your freshman year and what it'll actually look like. Okay, so now I'm on a different website. How did I get here? I simply just Googled computer science degree plan, Texas A&M, and this popped up. So we should be given a page like this. And if we go to program requirements, we can actually see a full degree plan of someone who was to do, for example, computer science, which I know is one of the most popular options right now. But essentially in your freshman year, most of the classes that you're going to be taking are going to be more or less very similar to other engineering majors. It's not really until later years where your classes kind of diverge. So first year, what is kind of popular? So this degree plan could essentially apply to all engineering majors, but if you want to back me up on that, say for example you're in aerospace engineering and you wanted to check that as well, you could simply go to the aerospace engineering track and then check the program requirements as well, and you see that it's the exact same. So let me actually go back to computer science. So in your freshman year, as you guys probably know already, you essentially don't get to declare a major until your second year. So this is where ETAM comes into play, and it's important to know these requirements so that you're set up for success to get the major that you ultimately want. So this is the latest class requirements for 2027. I doubt that they're going to change it for 2028. There's always these rumors floating around where they're going to make the ETAM requirement like 4.0 GPA. As of right now, that doesn't really seem to be the case. But yeah, it could be in a couple of years, honestly, given the amount of CS majors. So when it says grade point average here, it means that you have to have a 2.0 to even ETAM in the first place. If you want your guaranteed major, you have to have a 3.75, but 2.0 is like the baseline to even get a major. So yeah, you're not going to be getting CS with a 2.5 GPA. And here, let's go into required coursework. So we have a list of required classes, and they say, okay, 2 science courses must be taken from A&M, 2 engineering courses, 2 math, etc. So I'm going to break down each one of these classes and what they actually are. So engineering 102 is a intro level Python class. Now it helps to have prior programming experience, but you don't necessarily need it. I would say engineering 102 is kind of a weed out class because if you're completely new to programming, it may be hard to get the concepts down because they essentially go through it like you already know programming. To move on, engineering 216 or physics 216 is a physics lab that is most often taken in conjunction with physics 206. Now, because it says 2 engineering courses must be taken from Texas A&M from this list, Obviously, you have to take both of these classes if you want to ETAM. Now let's move on to science classes. So here it says that 2 science courses at Texas A&M must be taken from the following list. So most likely in your first semester of your freshman year, you're probably going to be taking Chem 107 and Chem 117. And then most likely in the second semester of your freshman year, you're going to be taking Physics 206. Now, here's where it kind of gets weird because even though it says 2 science courses must be taken at A&M, I know people who have ETAM'd with only taking one class, for example, and just taking AP credit for the other one. So most likely, like for 95% of the people, you're going to be taking Chem 107 and Physics 206. But if, for example, you have some crazy AP credits, you would probably have to meet with an advisor to discuss that. Now let's move on to math. So math is probably the most discussed course that you're going to be choosing when it comes time to build your schedule. So here, let's go through the classes and see what they actually entail. And you could always search these classes up and see what they mean. Trust me, when I first found out about these classes and math and like the numbers, I had no idea what they actually were. But after a while, you kind of get used to like the course structuring. I know it's a bit different from high school, but it takes a bit of a learning phase. But after a while, you like have it down perfectly. Just trust me. But yeah, so for most people in engineering, you're most likely going to be taking Math 151, which is Calculus 1 in your first semester. And then in your second semester, you're going to be taking Math 152, which is Calculus 2. Now, if you got a 4 or 5 on Calc BC, this is where the line between what you should do kind of gets blurred. I've talked to probably 20 people regarding this before I was making my schedule to get different opinions. So I'll tell you the facts and hopefully that'll help you make a better decision. So without a doubt, with everyone I've talked to, there's pretty much one common sentiment, which is to skip Math 152 at all possible costs. Now, it's not a terrible class if you take it. It's Calculus 2. But the thing is that it's a pure weed-out class. And they basically make the class harder every single year. So past year's tests are going to be easier than the current tests that you're taking. So you can't really use that to study for it. You have to find somehow harder questions to study for the test. And because it's a weed-out class, they're really not that lenient with stuff like curves and other things. And the professor you get can totally screw up your ETAM process. So the first school of thought is to take Math 151 in your first semester, and then take Math 251 in your second semester. This is really for people who are trying to adjust to college and don't want to jump straight into Calc 3, where there are maybe uncertainties about ETAM. Now, if you're confident in your calculus abilities, another option, which is what I personally did, was to jump straight into Math 251 and then do something like Math 308 or Math 304 or discrete math in your second semester. Now, thankfully, Math 251 is not a weed-out class, but I would say to not take it for granted because it's not necessarily an easy class as well. But the thing about it not being a weed-out class is if you put in the work to actually study, there's less of a chance that you're going to be screwed out by some random weed-out policy that they randomly adjust, and the class doesn't get harder every single year. And now let's move on to Q drops. So one big misconception that I had when I first read this was that Q drops were dropping classes with AP credit, because for some reason they put Q drop and also AP exams here. So I thought, okay, if you Q drop a math or science course and choose to accept a credit in its place, you may be jeopardizing your ETAM eligibility. So it's like, oh shoot, if I take AP credit, then I'm basically screwed. But no, Q dropping is completely different. It's when you're like at some point within a class already, you're through it and you realize, okay, this class is too hard for me. I can drop this and it can be removed from my transcript. So that's what people are talking about when they say Q drop. It has nothing to do with AP classes. And I don't know why they put this. It's just super confusing. Now, the counselors will make 3.75 sound like the hardest number ever accomplishable in the world. But I don't know who you are if you're watching this video, but I just want to say, I believe in you. If you put in the hours, you can do it and reach that 3.75 and get the major that you've always wanted. And feel free to reach out at any time if you need help. And once again, we can see Q dropping right here. So don't worry about this unless you actually Q drop. It has nothing to do with taking AP credit. Now let's just do a quick review of the freshman classes that most engineers will take, and then I'll give you guys some examples of electives that you can take if you're possibly running out of classes. So we have Chem 107 here, Chem 117, which is the lab. This necessarily isn't required. It's just a recommendation basically. This is required, and then a math is required. And then you could take a university core curriculum, as I kind of mentioned before, which are one of these requirements. So you can take these anytime in your 4 years. So whether you take it in your freshman year or whether you take it in your senior year are essentially the same. If you want like a free GPA boost, most of these classes are pretty easy, but yeah. Now let's move on to second semester. So this class, any math class essentially, it doesn't have to be 152 if you take AP credit, for example. Then we have physics. It's a recommendation for us to do a university core curriculum, but once again, we can do it at any point within our 4 years. And then finally, we have a recommendation for either chemistry or another university core curriculum. For chemistry, if you're someone like a CS or computer engineering major, there may not be a huge reason for you to take 120 because later in the future, you're not doing chemistry. But for example, if you're like a chemical engineer or a biomedical engineer, if that class, chemistry 120, is something that you're going to be taking in your degree plan later, then it may be worthwhile just getting it out of the way in your freshman year. And then we finally have another recommendation for a university core curriculum. Taking 3 in your freshman year could be an option, but you could also do one of these electives that I'm going to talk about. Now, just as a side note, this may be a little bit biased towards CS majors, but even if you want to do a CS minor, or if you're exploring CS, for example, and you may want to do it, I would highly recommend this one class. So here we have CS 120 and then CS 121. Now here's where they kind of troll you a bit. So CS 120 and CS 121 are literally the exact same class. The only difference is that 121 is 1 more credit hour than 120. Why they do this, I have no idea, but it's A&M, can never be too sure. So what does this class entail? It's essentially an introductory level C++ class where you get exposed to different stuff like object-oriented programming, stuff like linked lists, different data structures, and it's overall pretty cool if you're trying to get some exposure into CS. Now, would I recommend taking this class freshman year? Here's what it entails. Even though getting an A isn't necessarily hard if you do all the homework and study for the tests, you will have to put in a good amount of time into this class because the homeworks do take a bit of time. Sometimes they can range from 3 to even 6 hours in some cases. Say, for example, you're super cracked and you really want to do computer science, you're dead set, and you're extremely confident in your abilities. I would say you could do one of these in your first semester of your freshman year. And then in your second semester, you could do a class like CS 221, which is data structures and algorithms. Now, this class is incredibly important just as a base for computer science. This covers really fundamental topics in data structures and algorithms, and may be helpful if you're trying to find internships in the future. In addition, another elective that you could take is CS 222, which is more of a math class, but it's also really fundamental, sets you up with the basics, and overall really interesting. Lastly, I'm going to hit on this really quickly, but CS 181 is like a really easy class, I guess, if you want a 1 hour GPA boost. It's essentially you join a Zoom for like an hour and a half every single week, and then you fill out this report, turn it in, and then it's basically a completion grade for an A. So for this class, it could also be a better introduction to computer science if you don't want to dive straight into the C++ stuff, just to see what professors are kind of doing. So every single week, they'll bring a new professor to kind of discuss their research, talk about new fields in computer science, stuff like that. And it's pretty chill, it's just a lecture. So you basically join, do a report, and then you're out. So you could easily do this in the first semester or second semester of your freshman year. And it's pretty much not a large time commitment either. Now that we've seen some of these electives, let's go back to the degree plan to see how they kind of factor in. So you have chemistry, this stays the same. Not necessarily English, but 102, that'll stay the same, and a math class. But for example, you could do a class like CS 181 in your first semester, or CS 120 or 121. Just know that you have to find the right balance between a workload and then getting the good GPA for ETAM. So this is where you have to really look within yourself, I guess. And something that's really important to do is to reach out to people at A&M who went to your high school, because they can speak on the level of A&M's classes in correlation to your high school level classes. So you can see what that jump is and how large of a jump it is. so that you can properly gauge what ETAM will look like for you. Now, the reason I'm mostly talking about CS classes is because CS classes are pretty much the most open, I guess, for freshmen. For some reason, in other classes, for example, you're not going to be taking aerospace classes in your first year. They just won't allow you. But for some reason, they're a lot more lenient with CS classes like 181, 120, 121. So for example, for this last spot that we're trying to fill in, we could take a class like 120, 121, 181, or we could do a class like ENS 101 to meet some university core. So for this last spot here, we can do a ton of classes. We could do 120, 121, 181, for example, specifically in CS, or we could do some university core requirements. So for example, like ENS 101 that I mentioned before, which covers 2 university core requirements. And another really popular one is Polls 207, which is Texas history, because no AP exam actually covers that class. So you would actually have to take it at a community college or just take it at A&M. Me personally, I would recommend taking it at a community college because it saves you a good amount of money and time, and they're usually way easier at a community college. For the second semester, your choices are kind of the same, I guess, with different math choices. So if you skipped with Calc BC, then you have options like differential equations, CS 222, discrete math, or you could do linear algebra, which is also kind of fun. But overall, this is really trying to find the right balance between making ETAM and then the course load you're going to get. So you have to kind of decide, okay, can I manage this and will I be able to get the GPA to ETAM into my major? Because you don't want to be at A&M for a major that you don't really like. But anyways, this is just kind of my 2 cents on the topic. Hopefully this helped you out a little bit. If it did, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments what other topics I should make regarding A&M course schedules, for example, or anything else. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day.